Hi, you're listening to Boggy Talk, Faith Conversations in the Mud, a resource of Church on Bayshore.
Hey, welcome to Boggy Talk. We're going to pick up last week's conversation right where we left off. So if you did not get a chance to listen to last week's episode with Tyler and Kelsey, y'all have such a singable name. Y'all sound like it's like a music duo. Y'all need to do some mashups on YouTube.
Like, you do not want us to sing.
No.
Neither of us have a singing ability.
Oh, hey, it's okay. Well, hey, we're going to just pick up the conversation where we left off. And where we left off was really picking up with life here. We talked about what it's going to be and how you met. You shared some of your story, but you guys, I think, have exemplified that in the waiting, as you talked about having to wait. Like your desire was to already be overseas a few years ago, and God had His timing, has seen fit for it to be delayed for various reasons. But that didn't mean that you guys just stayed home and waited. And waited and waited and waited, but you were doing what you will be doing there here. So I want to talk about that because I think as a pastor at a church and also reflecting on my own life, this is an area where we all have room to trust Jesus more and be obedient more. And that is sharing the gospel and leveraging the relationships that God has put in front of us for this purpose. So let's just start there. As you guys have been here in the States and you've been in this community and then also, before in North Carolina, what has personal evangelism looked like for you guys?
Well, so depending on, where we're at and what phase of life. So like in North Carolina, we came back and we're a part of a plant, something that we did there, like
a church plant for yeah. We were part of a plant. What kind of plant? What were you making?
So it was like starting from a very small group. And I mean, one of the only ways that it could grow was by finding new people, new believers to add on to it. So it was very much not new believers, new people to grow the church. Because the idea, as with our church too, it's not about finding other believers to bring them over to our church and grow our church. But we would, like in that season, we would actually go out to the university campus and in twos and like share the gospel, try to start up conversation and, bridge it to the gospel and have those gospel conversations. Obviously, wherever we're working at the time, trying to just be intentional about, conducting ourselves in a manner that reflects Christ. And then, but not stopping there because very few people ever come to the gospel without somebody telling them about it.
Right.
So it can't just be us being Christ-like. It has to be followed with like an explanation of why it is. And so trying to share the gospel in our workplaces.
And we've both been in secular jobs for the most part.
Yeah.
I mean, solely, I guess, because I think a big misconception is if you're going into M work, then you had to have been a pastor or a teacher or at least work at a church or something. But I mean, at the time in North Carolina, we came back, you got a job working HR with Waffle House, and I was working at a gym as a personal trainer. So we were in secular jobs, very, very secular in some regards. Environments. Yeah, exactly. And I got to talk one-on-one with people all the time, which was amazing. It's like my forte. You're stuck with me for 30 minutes. I'm helping you work out. I'm helping you train. But at the same time, I'm talking to you about life. And, people open up to me.
Audience.
People open up to me about marriage and kids and family strife and stuff. I was like, I feel like I need a counseling degree for some of this stuff. So just making sure I was rooted in the word. And then Tyler, he's going around to all these different Waffle House stores, training with managers and, just having these interactions with people. So it's just a day-to-day thing. But yeah, and then we were intentional going out with our church plant to specifically evangelize. So there was a difference. There was like kind of that lifestyle evangelism and that very intentional. We are going out for the purpose of trying to meet people and share. And we would use methods like the 3 circles and different things like that I think our church is more familiar with. But yeah.
And then like now, moving down to Florida, also both had secular jobs, and, you know, I was working in the car business. So as you know, there's a lot of people that need the gospel.
You loved that season too, didn't you?
I was very glad when it was coming to a close. I'll just say that. But yeah, so then like in our neighborhood, we have tried to be intentional. And just, it started with just like, let's meet people. Like it can be really hard, I feel like, to find community outside of the church if you're a believer. And if you're not a believer, so many people, like, it's just like nobody wants to meet anybody anymore, is what it feels like to me.
Yeah,
so
people
we were
are sitting on their porches drinking sweet tea, waiting for the neighbor to pass by. Maybe in some places, but not
everybody's just so busy and consumed with what they're doing. Yeah. But so we wanted to be intentional, and first it just started by like meeting our neighbors. And so we started meeting different people.
Bring cookies. You can't go wrong when you bring a sweet treat to a neighbor. You can't get the door shut in your face. They'll at least give you 5 minutes, you know, sometimes more. But it started with, meeting through bringing just, hey, we brought some cookies over.
And by doing that, just kind of seeing who's open to a relationship. Right. So we met some neighbors not too long ago that just moved in, and we didn't really specifically talk about it, but it seemed like they weren't necessarily wanting a relationship per se. Mm-hmm. But we've met other neighbors that are like so open and warm, and like, I am hungry for a relationship.
You can just tell. In the interactions.
Mm-hmm. And so through interactions and having people over, we came to realize that, you know, some of these aren't believers. Some of them are, that are just completely not connected with the church. So we're like, okay, this is an opportunity. And Kelsey was really praying about it, and we both, you know, realized this need. And so we started a Bible study in our house and have just invited the different neighbors and have people come in. And so people are starting from different places. You know, some are believers and some aren't, but just everybody, all of us just trying to grow together.
That's good. So you're saying that you started a Bible study, not in a classroom, but at your own house?
We did. We did. And there's no excuse for not doing it, because if of probably all the homes in this church represented, ours is probably the smallest.
And we would put the baby down at 7. You know, we were strategic. It's a little easier. Most of our neighbors and people were inviting, they're either they don't have kids or they have older kids, so they can come after. So it had some advantages in our situation.
Mm-hmm. So I want to talk about that specifically, because you as you just said, you were strategic in this in terms of like leveraging a season of life. So you're not trying to do this at 5:00 dinner time because your neighbors can't come then, and you got a baby that would be, you know, me, which is appropriate for a baby. Maybe not saying me, but you know, but still crying or needing you. And I think that we have to examine our own seasons of life and rhythms of life, who's around us. But then you guys just simply started with inviting people. So I want you to talk about who came, because I think this is important for people to understand that you had people from all different kinds of walks of life, different backgrounds. How did that go? How are the conversations, and what were the interactions with those neighbors like after they came and found out that you are Jesus people? You know, I mean, they found that out before because you invited them to a Bible study. You weren't secretive, like, come to book club. Right. By the way, our book is the Bible.
We'll be on it forever.
And so most of the people that come do have some church background. There are a handful that aren't churched at all. And we had relationships with, I would say that their first interaction with us wasn't just coming to study. So we had a relationship with these people. One woman in particular, I would go on walks with her and we would have these chats, and kind of, I would try to bridge to spiritual things as much as I could. So it wasn't like, hey, we're meeting you, also Bible study, which it's not bad. And we actually would do that and probably have done that, but we did have some relationships. So they weren't surprised by the fact that we were believers. It was like, I'm coming. I'm not super comfortable with this context, but I trust you. We're friends. So I'll come and see how it goes. That's kind of how, I mean, there's a handful of people that probably maybe when we started would never go to a church.
Yeah.
And now I think most of them would, which is a really amazing when I think about it, the difference just from the personal one-on-one relationships and from the openness of this is a place to ask questions. You don't have to feel dumb. You don't have to know everything. We don't know everything. We prep for this. We don't know all the answers. Like we've caveated before. We're like, by the way, we don't just know all this. We study, we prep, we read commentaries. There are so many things we don't know. So I think just having that personal discussion is so big for people because you can go into a church and feel completely isolated, alone. I don't know anybody, and then never come back. But this is, and it's very interesting discussion because of the different walks of life and the different backgrounds of people growing up in Catholic backgrounds or growing up with no religion or growing up atheist, or it makes for interesting discussion, but it's beautiful and it's wonderful and it's exciting. Sometimes a little strange.
Yeah. And also we have to like Kelsey said, caveating the fact that we don't know all of this just because they come to us and they think, oh, you're these holy people and everything. It's no, actually we didn't know half of the stuff that we're talking about tonight. Maybe not exactly, we study.
You study and prepare. Yeah.
And then the other thing is we've also invited some believers to come alongside, trying to kind of get this ready to sort of pass off. But it's always interesting because people will we'll sit back because we are now familiar with the context that we have there. You have the unbeliever and you have maybe a more mature believer, but the more mature believer has not been in a group context like this where there's such varying levels and they're just talking right over the heads of the people. And they're just oh, I'm sure everybody knows blah, blah, blah. And it's no, actually they have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So let's rewind.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that you say that because I think even in church leadership, where we find ourselves, there's not a cultural knowledge of Bible stories that there used to be in our country. And I think we have to even be mindful of that on our Sunday morning gatherings where we don't say, well, everybody knows John 3:16. Actually, if you grew up in the church, you probably do.
Right.
And there may be some familiar hints of that, but most people now, if they're unchurched, don't know what it says beyond what seeing the reference maybe on a sign at a football game. And I don't mean that in a bad way. It's just reality, it's just where we are culturally. And I think, when you guys are hitting on something, it's it used to just be that you could just invite someone to church and they would, there was a favorable view of the church and the culture. And that has shifted somewhere. Many people still have a favorable view of the church, but many people don't because of a number of reasons. That's a different episode of Boggy Talk. But what you guys are hitting on is that people knew you and people trusted you because you built a relationship with them and they were willing to open themselves up to what you had to say, even if they weren't going to agree with it or believe it or understand it. So how would you respond to someone who says, okay, that's great. You've developed all these relationships with people, and you're trying to convert them to Christianity. Don't you just really have ulterior motives in all these relationships? Is your only motivation to get them to know Jesus?
Well, so it's kind of a weird dynamic to talk about in a sense, because it seems like it's just out for our good. But for one, we care about these people and we like making new friends and we like playing games and doing things, with different people. They don't have to look just like us. It's more fun to have the diversity of, that is out there. But ultimately, when we look at this life in the lens of eternity, what matters? And so me just, perpetually going and playing around with some guys and it just being about the sport or whatever it is, if it's not getting past that, then it might be good exercise, but in the long run, it's not doing anybody any good. And so just trying to leverage this life for the next life. And so
Come on, preach it, brother.
Because we know that like none of this is going to matter. So, I mean, none of the worldly things are going to matter. And so, yeah, it's important to us to share the gospel with these people that we, is here and then, in Kazakhstan and Italy, like we come to love these people and we want them to know the truth so that they can have life and, we can all be together with God in the end. So it is for their best interest too. And our heart, it's never supposed to be, just hammering truth on them, but it's because God's given us a love for people that we want to share the truth, and they have to be, it has got to be truth and love. You can't just love them and not ever tell them the truth, because
that's not real love.
No. And it's not going to do them any good in eternity. And if you just tell them the truth and you don't love them, then it's just going to turn them away. So yeah. Other thoughts?
No, that's great.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's so important that we recognize that reality. And I think we have to, and I think this is where we can err in only focusing, like if we should build relationships. And I think we should probably spend more time investing in relationships than we do. But if we only ever invest in the relationship and never get to the truth, then are we really loving? Or I think a lot of times we can fall in this trap of like, it makes me feel good that I have these friends who don't know Jesus, because then I can say I have friends who, and that's sick and twisted spirituality, so yeah, I do want them to know Jesus. Yeah, guilty as charged. However, our love for people isn't predicated upon whether or not they believe in him or they will listen. Like, we've had that conversation, I've had that conversation with people. And I think, one time talking to a neighbor in our previous neighborhood, and he was just struggling, and he just, and he, it's just like, do you really just care? Do you care? Or you just want to know Jesus? Is like, dude, I can't separate the two. Like, I can't separate the fact that I care about you and want you to know Jesus. Like, but I also recognize that you may reject him, and that's not going to change the care that I have for you. I'm going to be your friend. I'm going to be your neighbor. I'm not going to all of a sudden be like, oh, he doesn't want to talk about Jesus with me. I'm not going to help him out when his car breaks down next time. What kind of sick, twisted life would that be? I mean, you can't separate the two. They're intertwined. And so, I mean, how have these conversations gone? I think that's what in Bible study and then outside, I mean, maybe just in not sharing anybody's specific details, but I mean, what are some of the questions people have or what are some of the things that you're finding? Hey, these are the real issues going on in people's lives, and they've got questions on how to deal with this stuff. Well, so one guy that I've been trying to share with, he's not been so receptive. He has been a part loosely of I guess I'm not saying any names, so I'll just say a cult. That's very common. And so the Trinity is a really big issue for him. So for me, I mean, it's just been continuing to try to share the truth. And I'll come across something, reading on in my daily time, and I'll send it to him and be like, this is talking about the Trinity. Like, this is talking about how Jesus is God, and, that sort of thing. And just kind of trying to continue that dialogue, because like you said, just because he said no a few times, doesn't mean that we can't continue this dialogue, because he's open to it. And then we also, we have conversations outside of that, and, we go over and help him out and bring him a meal and that sort of thing. So,
Well, I remember we've had some great questions in group. I'm trying to think of, speaking of the Trinity, one of the first weeks, I mean, it took us about 6 months to go through 1 John, which is 5 chapters, because some weeks we would get one question about the first verse, and that was it. That's all we talked about. So one week, one of the unbelievers asked, so I don't get it. We pray to God sometimes, we pray to Jesus sometimes. Like, what's the difference? Who are Jesus and God? How are they related? And we're like, oh boy, we're getting into the Trinity. Let's go for it. And so we spent a whole, hour and a half on that. And by the end of it, she's like, I get it to an extent. I mean, to the degree that our finite minds can understand the Trinity, I get it. And she's like, I feel like I can now be equipped to go and explain to my kids who they do their prayers every night. And they're like, do we pray to God or Jesus? And she's like, I don't know. I got to go and I got to ask Tyler and Kelsey, and one week she asked, why did Jesus even have to come? Ooh, this is so good. So it's constant gospel conversations. And she's like, these are all things that I wanted to ask growing up because I didn't get it, but I couldn't ask it in Catholic church. You can't just go and ask and they'll make you feel bad or.
Which that's her specific.
Right. Her specific. Yeah, exactly. And so she just didn't feel like she had the ability to ask the questions. And so she's just been holding them in. So she just comes every week. We've joked with her, you need to keep a journal about your questions. And she was like, oh no, I have too many. But we say, if you have one, just ask it. And it happens. And it makes for great conversations. We've talked about ghosts. We've talked about life after death. We've talked about seances. I feel like we've talked about so many different things.
Random things.
Random
never
things.
know what's coming.
Right.
And some things we're like, we're going to try to veer back to some more important topics, but we do try to answer big questions and always point back to the gospel because that's ultimately what needs to be understood first and foremost. But I feel like we're there with most people. It's just that final act of surrender that is missing. That I get it. I know the stories. I know what Jesus did for me. I know that I'm a sinner, but you got to have that final, all right, I give up. Lord, you take over now.
Yeah.
I think that's what's missing in a couple of their lives.
Right. Well, I think, maybe somebody out there listening is like, hey, I think I could do that. And maybe that's not what somebody else needs to do, but you need to focus on, coworkers or family members. I don't know, but we're all called to be a part of this. I want to kind of shift back to, your work experiences, because I think that's a place that a lot of people struggle with. How can I bring this up, or how can I, quote unquote, work this in, in a work situation. And I know you guys have both experienced that, the opportunities that have come and sometimes you've seized the opportunity. Other times you haven't. So you're not perfect in this. And, and I think you guys are the first ones to admit that. And I think that's important for people to understand too, that we didn't ask you guys to share this because you have a 100% track record, but it's just, you have grown in faithfulness in this and God has continued to work through you guys. And so let's talk about what this looks like at work.
So, the place that comes to mind when you mention this is the car business. So back to the car business. So, something that was relatively easy for me to do was not to use the same language that everybody's using, expletives. And so by virtue of me not blending in, I kind of stood out. And so even that, people ask me, why don't you ever curse? And then just being able to take that question and then go off into my faith and how I've been changed and just going that direction. When it comes to I've worked with some rough bosses and they could be really hard and, why don't you disrespect them? Having people see how you act and then asking questions. And then also there's this idea, that we read somewhere along the way of dropping breadcrumbs. So if you're somebody asks you, or you ask how somebody's weekend was, and then they ask how yours was. And along the way of you explaining your weekend, maybe you talk about how, I got together with my life group on Saturday night, assuming that's true. And, we played.
Don't make up fictitious life group gatherings, please.
And so even in that, while that doesn't necessarily have to be a pointed conversation, it can just be along your description of your weekend. People can say, what's the life group? Or, why are you hanging out with, these church people? And then just getting into the fact that we're part of the body of Christ and we want to be together. And this is what ties us together and being able to explain the gospel inside of that. So just seeking to look for opportunities, praying for opportunities. And as we pray for opportunities, God gives them to us, but also I think he just opens our eyes to the opportunities and also just seeing, seeing the opportunities with, brokenness. So we talked about 3 circles here at the church. When people are talking about, how awful it is with, a war overseas or with, a mass murder, whatever it is, being able to say, yeah, like this is not how it's supposed to be. And then getting into the fact that we are broken and this is not God's design.
Mm-hmm.
And then sharing how the brokenness, in the brokenness, we can find Christ and he's the only way out. And then
Mm-hmm.
that can lead back to this perfect design. And
Mm-hmm.
so just trying to find the right ends for those conversations.
Yeah, that's good. Kelsey?
I don't know if I would add much to that.
Yeah.
Yeah. The personal relationships, I think, are huge, and not leaving them surface level. I think that's the hardest, is if you've had a relationship for a while, it's like, well, they already know me so well. Now it's just awkward to bring it up. But it's like, who cares?
Yeah.
I mean, they probably already sort of have an idea that you're a believer. I would hope that you look different than the world. So I think of that. What is it, a Friends episode or something, where it's like, you're a Christian. You didn't tell me you're a Christian, and you think I'm going to hell and you're okay with it. And it's like, it's kind of true. Like, if you have a friend that knows you're a believer and you've never shared with them, it's almost like, do you not, like, from their point of view, do you not care about me enough to share with me if you really think I'm going to hell one day? Like, I don't know. That's
a very good
So it's
point.
kind of an interesting dynamic to think of it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they should know that I care about them, and by sharing, I am caring about them. So, yeah, we use that excuse a lot. I know them, and now it's just kind of awkward.
Mm-hmm.
I've gotten past that point, but it's like we use the excuse in both ways. Well, I don't know them yet, so I want to get to know them. Okay, I'm going to get to know them. Once you get to know them too much, it's like, well, now I know them too well, and now it's awkward to share. It's like,
yeah,
you missed your perfect little window in there. It just,
yeah, absolutely.
there's no perfect.
So what would you guys, as we wrap it up, like, what would you say to somebody who's like, okay, I know I'm supposed to do this. I know that I need to do this, but where do I start?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what would you just say? Hey, just do this.
My first thought is start in prayer.
Yeah.
Pray for opportunities and pick out get accountability. Maybe ask somebody to pray for you and with you for that person, or for, if you're thinking about starting a Bible study. Like, we prayed about that together. I prayed separately, and then we prayed together about starting it, and then just do it. And then we just, at one point, we're like, we know we're supposed to do this. We have the people. Now it's just putting the action and just saying, we're going to start on Tuesday nights and come if you would like.
Yeah.
So I think prayer, accountability, and then courage in action.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think, like, practically, if you have other believers around you that maybe you've seen do some of this life, just asking for help. And I mean, there's different tools. Like, we talked about 3 circles. We talked about the story, just methods of sharing the gospel, because it's, if you don't have any, like, if it's like, I know the scriptures, but like, how do I start a conversation? Like, there's practical things.
Yeah, there's tools. Yeah.
There's tools. And then also, like, inside of that, knowing some specific scriptures to be able to insert into it, because it's not based on what we feel or what we think or what we were taught as kids. It's based on the fact that the scriptures are true. And so being able to point back to the scriptures as we're sharing.
Yeah, that's good. So pray, make a plan, get people along with you, and then do something. And get equipped,
Yes.
Seek out ways and tools. Yeah. What, anything else you guys want to add to this? I think you've shared a great stuff. Good. All right, so we're gonna wrap this up with a little game, because we didn't. This is 2 weeks, so we're gonna wrap it up with a little game. So you guys are gonna be serving with an International Mission Board, and for those of you who are Southern Baptist or are familiar with the International Mission Board, is the mission supporting sending agency of our convention, and they're supporting over 3,000 M's around the world and doing great work. So a good bit of the fun, actually the majority of the funding for the International Mission Board comes through the Lottie Moon Christmas offering, which is named for a heroine of the Southern Baptist life, Lottie Moon, who was one of the first M's to go to another country. She went to the country of China. Yeah, you go. All right. So what we're going to do is have a little quiz on Lottie Moon. All right. So if you're not Southern Baptist, you're like, what did he's saying Lottie Moon? Yes, that is for real the name. But we're going to talk about this woman who was a pioneer in missions. And so that's a fantastic thing. And just find a little bit more about her and the ways that, so you guys, I'm going to ask a question. You're both going to guess. We're going to see who gets the closest to the right answer. Okay. So, what was Lottie's real first name?
Ooh.
I don't know how I'm going to judge who's closer, but 3,
It's gotta
2,
be
1.
like a lot of
I'm trying to think of a L name.
Lottie.
I don't know. I kind of thought that was her real name. I'm going to go with that's her real name.
Ooh, like I'm trick
I don't
questioning
think it
you.
is.
All right.
I think it's like
Only because
Yeah.
I can't really.
Oh, wait. As soon as I say it, you're like, oh, Charlotte.
No.
Charlotte.
I
You know,
get it.
there you go.
I get
There
it.
you go.
So I was close.
You're like, no, I'm not
So
going
are
to
we
get
gonna
it.
I
start
said
calling
a
Charlotte
lot,
Lottie?
Yeah, we're
around
like,
here?
we should start calling Charlotte Smith.
Charlotte
Who works
Lynn.
on our staff, Lottie. She will go, no.
No. Yeah.
She'll say no. In that exact voice, no. All right. So, in what year, it wasn't called International Mission, it was called the Foreign Mission Board at the time. In what year was Lottie officially appointed to serve?
Eesh. How old is I?
I'm gonna go with 1857.
1857. All right.
Just kidding.
1890.
Okay, the correct answer is 1873. So quick math. I think y'all are like 16 and 17 years. I'm doing this top of my head.
I was
but
only 14. No,
There
no.
you
What
go.
did I say? I said 57.
You said 57.
I was taught never to do math in public.
I
There
was
you go. That's right.
I was 16 years off.
And you're 17. Well, that was
off.
pretty good. Way to go, guys. That was
very
not
close.
bad.
One was over, one was under.
Okay,
Price
so
is right. You were
the first Lottie Moon offering was collected in 1888 by a handful of women in their Women's M Union. So, how much was the first Lottie Moon Christmas
1888.
offering?
That's an interesting question. $43.
That's a good guess.
Really?
That's so low. It is low, but it's just a handful. It was just a handful.
And it was in 1888. Like you could buy a house for like $1,000.
You could buy a lot of things in 1888 for $43.
Yeah.
Okay. 500.
What? That's a lot.
Oh, actually, this is incredible. It was $3,315. What? Isn't that crazy?
I was gonna
Which
go
is
higher, but
roughly,
you guys pulled me down.
which is rough in 20. This is when this article is written. In 2015, that's roughly $75,000. Like in
Whoa.
which $75,000 in 2015. Now in 2023, that's like $7.8 million. I feel like.
That is wild.
Yeah, but from a handful, which is really cool. So the next question is, all right, in the year 2021 to 2022, so ending in 2022, how much was collected with the Lottie Moon offering? Man, they're going to expect you to guys know this stuff, especially, when they send you out to churches to
put
talk.
that number in my head with that last one, like 10 million?
I'm
gotta be
going to
more than
say
Way more.
180
Yeah, it's got to be more than that. Yeah.
million.
Close.
So
All right.
bad at numbers.
203.7 million is the highest ever offering. You're like, they're like,
I guess $43.
they are not hiring Kelsey for the accounting position. That's not you. That's not your job on the field. So
Nope.
yeah, 203.7
Wow.
million, which is that's a lot of money. So
Wow.
which actually people don't always understand this because we talk about we give to the cooperative program, and a portion of what we give to the cooperative program stays in Florida, a portion goes to IMB, a portion goes to NAM, but really only I believe it's like 32% of IMB's budget is from the cooperative program. Actually, like 63% of their operating budget is from the Lottie Moon Christmas offering. So that's why at Christmas time, we talk about that a lot, because we know that it helps the money go to the nations even further when we give specifically to that offering. So it is very important that we do that. All right. So most people don't know this, but Lottie actually basically died because she gave all of her food away to the people, because there's great famine in China. And so she was incredibly affected physically by her service there. And in 1912, as she was approaching her death, she had basically starved herself because she was giving her food away to help those who were starving. So this is a little bit morbid, but I think it's fascinating. The time of her death, and we've already talked that she was a short woman. So at the time of her death, how much did Lottie Moon weigh?
75 pounds. I think I promise. I always guess first. And then you
and then you base off of what, well, and you're not competitive at all.
I'm actually thinking about
this. So it goes back to your personality. It's like, you're like, jump in, and he's like, I need to think about this. I'm going to process.
I'll say 80 pounds.
All right. 50 pounds.
Oh my
Isn't that crazy?
But she was tiny.
She was tiny. So she was like 4'10". Yeah, she was very short. So, well, and I know that's like a crazy trivia question, but the point is, and you said this last week or this week, it's all kind of run together, but in terms of like, this isn't our life. Like our life, we have eternity. And so she literally believed that to her death. Like I can do this because, Jesus is worth it. He's worth it. So there you go, a little Lottie Moon history. So we'll be preparing to talk about that, and again, the coming months as we approach Christmas. We traditionally do that at Christmas time, and so we just say, a blessing of being sent for you guys to the International Mission Board is that you will be fully funded through this giving, and they support you. There's ministry expenses included in that, but you're fully funded. So, we have talked about, we have other M's that we support through our church that have to raise their own support because they're not with IMB. And though that is beautiful and it's a blessing, but that's not the case for you guys. So you're able to focus a lot more attention on the other preparation that you have to do and not raise funds. So that's why we give. That's a reason. One of the many reasons why we give and support international missions and IMB and the Lottie Moon Christmas offering. So, church, thank you for your generosity.
Absolutely, it's a huge blessing not to have to think about fundraising all the time. Kelsey's parents were on the field and they were doing that, and it becomes a part of your efforts. A large part of your efforts is just trying to be able to maintain finances to stay there at EMB. So it's a huge blessing. And like you said, with Lottie Moon, 100% of it goes to the field, like to support the workers.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, we, we're not, the church is, as I say, we're not supporting you financially, but we are with our giving, and we will be, with our Barnabas ministry teams, but we will certainly be supporting you guys, lifting you up, to the Father. And we will certainly be checking in with you, because I think this is important for our church to understand that we don't just send people away and say, we're still your church and we'll always be your church, and we look forward to hopefully, once you guys are there and established and settled, and be able to come alongside you with teams of support who get to be there and serve alongside you. So all these exciting things are unknown to us, but they are known to a God who sees it all. He's already there. I love it. So, hey, thank you guys so much for sharing. And hey, if you've got questions for us for future episodes of Boggy Talk, or you've got questions for Tyler and Kelsey, feel free to pass them on to us, and we'll pass them on to them, and then we'll report their answers and how they expertly answer everything. So, hey, thank you guys so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to Boggy Talk. We are so glad you joined in the conversation. Go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss a beat.